the blistering heat of a Texas summer in 1947, St. Agnes Convent stood like a forgotten monument in the middle of nowhere. The building was made of cracked gray stone, its tall steeple cutting through the sky like a blade. From a distance, it looked holy and untouched, but up close, there was something unsettling about it. The windows were narrow and dark, as if the convent itself was watching anyone who dared to come near. Locals rarely passed by after sunset, saying the air around the place felt heavier than anywhere else in town. Inside those walls lived a small group of nuns who rarely spoke to outsiders. Among them was Sister Margaret, the strict and silent leader, Sister Evelyn, known for her soft voice but piercing stare, and Sister Ruth, the youngest, who many said looked afraid most of the time. During the day, they taught orphaned children, delivered food to struggling families, and led prayers in the tiny chapel. To the public, they appeared gentle, devout, and completely ordinary, but those who knew them well sensed they were hiding something. At night, the convent transformed into something entirely different. When the sun dipped below the horizon, an unnatural silence blanketed the property. Even the crickets stopped chirping. Some neighbors claimed they saw faint candlelight flickering in windows that had been sealed shut decades earlier. Others swore they heard low murmurs drifting through the open fields, as if the nuns were speaking to something unseen in the darkness. No one ever gathered enough courage to approach the building after midnight. The layout of St. Agnes was strange, even for a convent. Long, narrow hallways stretched endlessly, leading to locked doors that no visitor had ever been allowed to enter. The west wing, in particular, was off-limits to everyone, even to some of the younger sisters. It was said that only Sister Margaret held the key, and she carried it at all times around her neck. The few who had glimpsed inside described the air as icy cold, even in the middle of summer. Despite its holy appearance, the convent carried a reputation that chilled the bones of nearby townsfolk. Children were warned to stay far away, and farmers avoided grazing their cattle near the property line. Many believed the land itself was cursed long before the convent was ever built. Still, the nuns continued their daily routines, acting as if nothing was wrong, all while something dark and ancient seemed to breathe quietly beneath the stone floors of St. Agnes. On the evening of August 14, 1947, the Texas sky burned a deep crimson before fading into an uneasy darkness. The air was thick, heavy, and strangely still, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Farmers working nearby later said it felt different from any other night, not peaceful, but watchful. Even the wind refused to move, leaving the tall dry grass frozen in place around St. Agnes Convent. From miles away, the building looked like a dark silhouette against a starless sky, its tall steeple disappearing into the black clouds above. As midnight approached, faint sounds began drifting from the convent grounds. At first, they were barely audible, soft whispers carried across the open fields. But soon, those whispers grew into slow, rhythmic chanting. One local rancher later claimed it didn't sound like prayer. Instead, he said it felt like a summoning, as if voices were calling something from beneath the earth. His dogs refused to leave the porch, their tails tucked tightly between their legs. Around 12:17 a.m., several neighbors reported seeing dim candlelight flickering inside the convent's sealed windows. These windows had been boarded up for decades, yet warm golden glows shimmered behind them like living fire. Shadows moved behind the glass, tall, thin shapes that seemed to sway in unnatural patterns. No one in town dared to walk closer, even though many felt an unbearable urge to look. Some later admitted they felt as if the building itself was pulling them toward it. Inside St. Agnes, something far stranger was unfolding. Though no one could see clearly, distant witnesses swore they heard the sound of footsteps echoing across stone floors, followed by the ringing of a small metal bell. The bell's tone was hollow, almost mournful, and lingered in the night air longer than any normal sound should. It was as if the convent was breathing, alive with something that did not belong to this world. As the hours crept toward dawn, the chanting slowly faded into silence. The candlelight vanished, leaving the convent cloaked in complete darkness once again. But the night did not feel over, it felt interrupted. When the first rays of sunlight touched St. Agnes the next morning, everything appeared normal from the outside, yet an invisible tension still clung to the air, like a storm that had passed but left its mark behind. By the afternoon of August 15, 1947, word of the 3 missing nuns had spread across the small Texas town like wildfire. At first, people whispered quietly in grocery stores, church pews, and front porches, but soon those whispers grew into heated arguments. Some residents insisted the sisters had simply abandoned the convent in secret, perhaps fleeing a harsh life of isolation. Others, however, spoke in hushed tones, convinced that something far more sinister had taken place behind those stone walls. At the local diner, old men sat over black coffee and debated what had happened that night. One claimed he had heard chanting unlike any prayer he had ever known. Another swore his horse had refused to move near the convent's gate at dawn, rearing in terror as if it sensed danger. The more people talked, the darker the stories became, and with each retelling, the mystery grew deeper and more frightening. Children in the town began telling strange tales of their own. Several said they heard footsteps echoing inside the empty convent at night, even though everyone knew no one lived there anymore. A young girl claimed she saw a nun standing in an upstairs window, staring silently into the darkness. Parents tried to dismiss these stories as imagination, but even they felt uneasy when passing near St. Agnes after sunset. Meanwhile, the local church offered little comfort. The priest avoided direct answers, speaking only of God's will and urging the community to pray rather than speculate. His silence only fueled suspicion. Some townsfolk believed the church was hiding the truth, that they knew exactly what had happened inside the convent but were too afraid to reveal it. This created a growing divide between those who trusted the clergy and those who did not. As weeks passed with no trace of Sister Margaret, Sister Evelyn, or Sister Ruth, fear settled permanently over the town. Farmers avoided working near the convent fields, and families stopped visiting the old chapel entirely. Though life technically continued as normal, everyone carried an unspoken dread, a feeling that whatever had taken place that night in 1947 was still unfinished, still watching, and still waiting. By the summer of 2023, St. Agnes Convent had become nothing more than a crumbling relic of the past. Weeds crawled up its cracked stone walls, broken windows gaped like empty eyes, and the once proud steeple leaned slightly to one side as if it was slowly giving up. Teenagers dared each other to sneak onto the property at night, while older residents still crossed themselves when driving past. The town council finally declared the building unsafe and scheduled it for demolition, hoping to erase what they believed was a cursed landmark. On the first morning of demolition, heavy machinery rolled in before sunrise. Bulldozers idled in the dirt while workers in hard hats stared up at the towering structure. Many of them later admitted they felt uneasy, not from the height of the job, but from a strange chill in the air, even though the Texas sun was already blazing. As the first wrecking ball swung toward the west wing, some workers swore they heard a faint echo, like distant bells ringing inside the walls. As the outer stones began to crumble, dust clouds filled the air, blanketing the site in a ghostly haze. The sound of metal against stone echoed across the empty fields, yet beneath the chaos, there was an eerie silence that made everyone uncomfortable. One veteran worker paused his machine, saying he felt as if someone was watching them from inside the building, even though it had been abandoned for decades. By midday, the crew reached a storage room in the convent's west wing, a section that had always been locked off even before the building was abandoned. When they tore down a portion of the back wall, they noticed something strange. The bricks behind it didn't match the rest of the structure. The masonry looked newer, as if it had been intentionally placed to conceal something long ago. Tools fell silent as every worker stared at the odd discovery. Curiosity quickly turned into unease as they began removing more bricks. Instead of open space, they uncovered a solid barrier behind the original wall, a second, hidden wall that had never appeared on any architectural plans. The air that seeped through the cracks was cold and stale, carrying a faint, metallic scent that made some workers gag. At that moment, everyone realized this was no ordinary demolition. They were about to disturb something that had been buried for 7 to 6 years. When the last layer of bricks was pulled away, a narrow doorway appeared where no doorway should have existed. It was barely tall enough for a person to stand upright, and darkness poured out from within like a living breath. Workers hesitated, their flashlights trembling in their hands, unsure whether they were about to uncover a long-lost storage room or something far more disturbing. The air seeping from inside was icy cold, even though the Texas heat outside was suffocating. As they stepped inside, their boots crunched against a thick layer of dust that had clearly remained untouched for decades. The chamber was small, circular, and completely hidden from the rest of the convent, almost as if it had been deliberately sealed off from the world. The walls were rough stone, unlike the polished interior of St. Agnes, giving the space a primitive, almost ancient feel that didn't match the rest of the building. In the center of the room stood a low stone altar, cracked and worn with time. Carved into its surface were strange symbols, not Latin, not biblical, and not familiar to any priest or historian who later examined them. Around the altar lay scorched candle stubs melted into uneven shapes, as if they had burned for hours before suddenly going out. The smell of smoke still lingered faintly in the air. Along the back wall, workers spotted 3 neatly folded black habits resting on a dusty wooden bench. Though the fabric was old and fragile, it was not torn or decayed like everything else in the room. Each habit had a small embroidered name stitched inside the collar, yet no one dared to touch them at first. It felt as though whoever had worn them had just stepped away moments ago. Then someone noticed the small rusted bell sitting atop the altar. Its metal surface was dull and corroded, but when a worker leaned closer, he swore he felt warmth radiating from it, as if it had been rung recently. The deeper they looked into the hidden chamber, the clearer it became that this was not just a forgotten space, it was a place where something forbidden had been performed long ago. When investigators arrived at the hidden chamber, the mood shifted from curiosity to outright dread. Forensic teams moved carefully, treating the space like a crime scene frozen in time. Their flashlights revealed more details than the workers had noticed. Fine scratches in the stone floor, faint handprints on the walls, and dark stains that seemed older than the building itself. Every step echoed unnaturally, as if the room remembered what had happened inside it decades ago. One detective carefully examined the 3 black habits found on the bench. Inside each collar was a name stitched in faded thread: Sister Margaret, Sister Evelyn, and Sister Ruth. The discovery sent a chill through the entire team. These were not random relics. They were direct links to the 3 nuns who vanished in 1947. Yet there were no bodies, no bones, and no signs of struggle anywhere in the chamber. As the team scanned the floor, they uncovered something even more disturbing. Beneath the thick layer of dust was a circular marking carved into the stone, barely visible at first. The circle was jagged, uneven, and filled with symbols that no historian or priest could translate. It looked less like a religious symbol and more like a boundary meant to trap, or summon, something. In the center of the circle, investigators found tiny grooves in the floor, as if 3 people had stood there for hours without moving. Nearby lay melted wax, arranged in a deliberate pattern that suggested careful preparation rather than chaos. It was clear this had not been an act of fear or desperation. It had been planned, repeated, and ritualistic. The longer the team studied the chamber, the more they felt they were not just uncovering history, but reopening something that had never truly gone silent. Some officers reported headaches, others felt watched, and one refused to step inside at all, claiming the room breathed. Whatever the nuns had attempted that night in 1947 was now staring back at the present, waiting to be understood. After the discovery of the hidden chamber, the site was sealed off under police supervision, but rumors still spread like wildfire through Texas and beyond. Journalists camped outside the broken convent walls, cameras pointed at the ruins as if waiting for something to emerge. Locals avoided the area entirely, claiming that the air around St. Agnes now felt colder than ever, even in the middle of scorching summer nights. Despite official statements that the case was closed due to lack of physical remains, no one truly believed the mystery was over. That same evening, security cameras placed around the demolition site captured something deeply unsettling. Grainy footage showed 3 shadowy figures standing inside the rubble of the west wing, unmoving, almost perfectly aligned where the hidden chamber had once been. Their shapes resembled nuns in long habits, yet their outlines shimmered slightly, as if they were made of smoke rather than flesh. The figures remained still for nearly 30 seconds before fading into darkness. The footage was analyzed frame by experts, but no technical explanation could be found. There were no signs of tampering, no trick lighting, and no human presence on site at that hour. Yet when the cameras were checked the following morning, several had mysteriously malfunctioned, as if something had interfered with them deliberately. This only fueled public fear that whatever had been awakened was now moving freely. In the weeks that followed, nearby residents reported strange occurrences. Some heard faint chanting drifting across the fields after midnight. Others claimed to see candlelight flicker inside the demolished ruins, despite the building being nothing but rubble. A few even said they glimpsed 3 robed figures walking slowly along the old convent path, disappearing as soon as anyone tried to approach them. Meanwhile, investigators quietly stopped discussing the case in public. Behind closed doors, some admitted they felt they had disturbed something far older and darker than they could comprehend. The records of St. Agnes Convent remained sealed, and the land was declared off-limits indefinitely. Yet no one could shake the feeling that the 3 vanished nuns were still present, watching, waiting, and silently calling out from the shadows. And so, the mystery of St. Agnes Convent remains frozen between faith and fear. Officially, the 3 nuns vanished without a trace in 1947, and the case is closed. But for those who know the truth, or think they do, the story is far from over. The hidden chamber may have been exposed, but whatever was awakened that night still lingers in the shadows of that cursed land. Some say the nuns were not victims, but willing participants in a ritual they never fully understood. Others believe they were taken by something ancient that lives beneath the Texas soil, something that predates the church itself. And then there are those who claim the nuns are still there, not alive, not dead, but trapped somewhere in between. Even today, locals avoid the ruins after sunset. Truck drivers report static on their radios when passing by, and late-night travelers swear they hear distant bells and soft chanting drifting across the empty fields. So the question remains, were the three nuns truly gone? Or are they still watching, waiting, and calling from beyond? And if you ever find yourself near those ruins at midnight, ask yourself this before you stop your car. Are you brave enough to listen?
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.